Good morning, and welcome to the Veterans Forum. This program is coming to you from the studios here in Bedford, New Hampshire. It's being put on in conjunction with the Library of Congress's Veterans History Project, which started back in the year 2000, wherein they have asked stations such as this and guys like me throughout the country if they can and will share that facility with veterans, male or female, who served in any of the wars. World War II, Korea, Vietnam, Desert Storm, and whatever else we're going through right now. If they can and will share those experiences in a televised interview, after the show they'll get a copy of it for their own use. Actually, if you think about it, it's perhaps one of the best legacies a guy or gal could leave the family, because it's history that's being recorded and reported by the people who made it. It answers a lot of questions like, hey, Grandpa, what did you do in the war? After that, it takes a lot of your mind. What we're trying to do is, throughout the country, have these guys and gals tell their stories. Some of them are funny, some are very sad, but most of them are just reflections. Sometimes we may have a date or two mixed up, but you'll give us the benefit of the doubt. Before we start today's interview, though, there's something here I'd like to share with you. This is a system throughout the state of New Hampshire, wherein if you dial 211, it connects you with a cadre of people who will offer any and all services that any guy or gal may need, or their friends may feel they need. Ask for it. It's there for your help. You deserve it. It may be just the best phone call you'll make in a long time. Now today we have another fellow who was going back a few years. This is what he looked like way back when, in 1965, 66. I'll ask Dave to introduce himself, identify him as he is today, and then we'll take the show off from there. Okay, if you're ready, let's go. Good morning, sir. And I'd like you to introduce yourself, spell your last name if you will, tell us where you now live, dates of service, and branch of service.
David Wall, W-A-L-L. I live in Bedford.
New Hampshire.
Bedford, New Hampshire. I served in the United States Marine Corp from 1965 to 1992. 4 years active duty and 23 years active reserve.
Wonderful. Now, we know who you are, we've seen what you look like way back when.
Right.
What I'd like to do is find out how you came to be, to it. Let's go back, like where and when were you born? What was your family life growing up when you were a kid? Just the little things that may make interesting.
I was born in Woburn, Massachusetts back in 1943. My father was a blue-collar sheet metal worker, suffered from arthritis, could not serve in World War II. Well, all his brothers and cousins did. Went to grammar school in Woburn, went to high school in Lowell, Massachusetts, went to college up here in New Hampshire at St. Anselm.
Oh, going back a little bit, just what kind of a student were you in school? Were you in athletics and drama club, that kind of stuff? Were you a sharp guy?
I wasn't in the drama club. I played Little League and PAL football and basketball, like all kids. I was an average student, not a super student. I always had a kind of a strange sense of humor and was a jokester. But I think I had a pretty normal life back in the 40s and 50s.
Okay, but the definition of normal varies among a lot of people, I think, if we go. Okay, now, you did, from your history, you went to college, but can you tell us why and how you went to St. Anselm's? Any particular reason for that choice?
Well, I went to high school in Lowell, a place called Keith Academy, which was a Catholic high school. And quite a number of their graduates ended up at St. Anselm College, either as priests or teachers, and there was a lot of heavy-duty recruiting. And my parents thought that continuing a Catholic education for me would be good, and so I applied to St. Anselm's and St. Michael's and Boston College, and for financial reasons, St. Anselm became the best choice for the family.
Were you in any way tending toward the priesthood, or was that just one of the alternatives? Or don't you know?
Not once in my life did I ever want to be a priest.
Okay, I just had to ask.
No. My mother would have liked that. That would have been a fast lane to heaven. But that's every Irish mother's dream is at least one of her kids goes into becomes in the clergy. But I did not do that. I fortunately fell in love with young women at about the age of 6 and never got over it.
Oh, started late in life.
Yeah, it's true.
Now, was there a ROTC at?
No, there was no ROTC at St. Anselm, but there was a very strong presence of reserve programs up there. There was no ROTC. I think the only ROTC at that time may have been UNH back in the 60s. But I had a number of senior friends and older classmen who migrated to the military after graduation. I was strongly influenced by a Bedford resident, Walter Gallo, a retired Marine colonel, who was director of alumni relations at the college, and he was very influential, if you will.
Give some good suggestions.
Yeah, a lot of good suggestions. And very frankly, when you I was a liberal arts major when I got out of college in 1965. Job prospects weren't that great. The draft was facing me, and I decided to beat the system, if you will, and beat the draft by joining the Marine Corps.
Get your choice.
I joined the Marine.
Yeah.
At least I had a choice.
Yeah.
And I spent better part of 27 years involved with the Marine Corps, and they say once a Marine, always a Marine. I still feel like I'm a Marine today.
Now, when you went from that civilian life into the Corps, where and when did you enlist, and how was it getting in the first couple of weeks in boot camp, that kind of stuff? Everybody has their own little take.
Well, it was frightening. I enlisted. Yeah. Here's a strange thing. I thought I was going to be a pilot, and I went down to the officer selection officer in Boston to take the test, and I took the flight test, and it was graded right there. And at the end, the officer selection officer, if you will, told me I passed the flight test, but I didn't do well in it, and I would probably have a tough time in flight school. And I figured he knew better, so I never said a word about it, and I went off to OCS and in Quantico, Virginia, and then that was 12 weeks of hell. I'll get back to that in a moment. Then I went to the basic school, another 18 weeks. Then they sent me off to artillery school in Oklahoma, another 12 weeks, the Vietnamese language school in Monterey. But when I get back to Camp Lejeune after artillery school, I met the officer selection officer who put me through the test.
Made your decision for you.
Right, and he said, I met him actually at the officers club on a Friday night. And when I introduced myself, he said, "Oh, I remember you." And he told me that I did very well on that flight test. But he had a ground quota to meet.
And you were number one.
And I was number one. So as a result of that, I never went to flight school. But OCS was frightening. 500 young men got off the buses and off the trains at Quantico, all college graduates from all over the country.
Not sure, but how'd you get to Quantico? Did you drive down?
Train from
en masse?
From Boston to Quantico by train.
Okay.
All the way down. A long journey back in 1965. But OCS was frightening because back then they were trying to screen people out, not screen people in to the Marine Corps. And we started out with 750 OCS candidates in my class, and we only graduated about 450.
Wow.
Over 300 either got thrown out or washed out on their own. But of my 4 years in active duty, I think I was in school for 2 of them. Good training, Army, primarily military, and language school was interesting. Artillery school was very interesting, Oklahoma.
Any idea why you were selected, or did you volunteer for that kind of stuff? Because usually if you ask for it, there's a good chance of getting it in advance.
Yeah, at the end of basic school, you're a probationary lieutenant at that particular point. And you are you can make a request as to what type of military operational specialty you would like. And I did so and was selected for the artillery. I actually wanted to get into a less combative role, but the needs of the Marine Corps was such that they need artillery officers. And I was told by the commanding officer of my unit that I should be happy because the Army sends its most intelligent people to artillery school. That's what he told us.
Wonderful.
But it was fantastic training and and exciting. I had never been west of Springfield, Massachusetts in my life until I joined the Marine Corps. And I remember driving cross country to Oklahoma where I felt like Lewis and Clark.
the wagons and back, and
absolutely.
Scout out front with the buffalo gun.
It was just wonderful. I mean, I think the military, at least back then, probably today, provides some outstanding training for young people. They really do.
Yeah. Now, can you go back a bit and tell us some of the things that you had to do to learn or to be qualified and comfortable with, so that you were being developed?
Well, all OCSs are basically the same. I mean, they're trying to teach you culture, they teach you the customs and histories of the unit that you're in. Mm-hmm. It's very demanding physically. Physical training is very heightened. When you move up to the next level, in the case of the Marine Corps basic school, you're learning tactics, you're learning about weaponry, you're learning about customs, and you're learning about leadership. Throughout all your basic training, you'll have episodes or times when you'll be in charge of a unit to accomplish some form of an educational task.
On-the-job training, in effect.
It's absolutely on-the-job training. It's outstanding training. And, I think if it weren't for the military, I would probably have been working behind a desk in an insurance company office for the rest of my life. But I think what the Marine Corps does is it takes young men and women today and helps, it teaches them structure, discipline, organization, teamwork, loyalty. And you just can't get that without listening and learning from people who've been down that road before.
Yeah. There's one word I'd like to add to that a lot of the guys have stressed before you and afterwards, I guess: responsibility.
Absolutely, and accountability.
And accountability, right.
Absolutely.
You stand up and I am me, good or bad. This is
Correct.
what I did and why.
Yeah, I think the Marine Corps used to tell us, if you're going to make mistakes, make them by commission, not omission.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And
so you know what not to do the next time.
That's exactly right. It's a lot easier to ask for forgiveness than for permission.
Yeah.
When you're in a combat situation, you don't have time to overanalyze issues.
Okay. Now, when you finally got through your 3 different schoolings, were you then given a choice as to where you wanted to go, stateside?
You don't have any
overseas?
choices in the Marine Corps.
They told you were going to volunteer to go to Nam.
Well, I put that I wanted to. One time, made a request. I wanted to go to Marine Barracks, Bermuda, but they kind of laughed at that.
You didn't play golf well enough.
No, well, back then, 95% of the people, more than that, 98% of the people who went through the Marine Corps program back in the mid-'60s ended up in Vietnam. Mm-hmm. Very few. Out of 400 or so classmates of mine that graduated from OCS, I know of only 2 that did not go to Vietnam. And they went to the Mediterranean, on ships, accompanied with the Navy.
OFMS, yeah.
That's exactly right. So, I mean, we knew we were going to go to Vietnam. We knew we were going to go.
Okay.
It's just, when our fathers and uncles went through World War II, they knew exactly where they were going to go.
Yeah.
Europe or the Pacific.
Yeah.
So, I mean, we weren't kidding ourselves. We knew that we were going to be in a hot situation.
Okay. To establish kind of a chronology, where and when did you get your orders to go to Nam, and how did you get there? I'd like to get some of that traveling.
After I finished artillery school, I got sent to Camp Lejeune, North Carolina. And I was sent into a tracked vehicle, an artillery unit with self-propelled artillery. And after, I was the tracked vehicle maintenance officer for the unit, which was a holding position because they knew we were all going to go to Vietnam eventually. So one day I got a call from the admin officer of my unit, and he said, I want you to come to a certain building and take a test. I said, what kind of a test? He said, well, you'll find out when you get there. So I went into a building and sat down with a bunch of other Marines, and I was administered a language test. It was called Esperanto, which is an artificial language test designed to determine what your capacities were for learning a foreign language. I took the test, didn't have a clue what it really meant. A couple of weeks later, I got a set of orders to go to the Defense Language Institute in Monterey, California.
Rough duty.
Presidio, Monterey to be exact, to study Vietnamese. And I think the reason I did so well in the test is I had taken 2 years of French in high school, 4 years of Latin in high school,
All right.
2 years of Latin in college. And I think that language training, if you will, the disciplines of sentence structure and vocabulary, I think that gave me an edge in that particular test. So I spent 12 weeks of Vietnamese language school before going to Camp Pendleton, California for 30 days of pre-deployment training, if you will. And when I went to Vietnam, with this language training, I spent 6 months as a forward observer with the infantry going out in infantry operations, and I had a Vietnamese scout assigned to me. And between the two of us, we did the best we could to interrogate people and avoid landmines, et cetera, et cetera. So the language training really helped me out quite a bit.
Sounds interesting.
Then I spent, as I said, 6 months with the infantry. I got promoted to first lieutenant and was taken back into the artillery battery, where I was responsible for the operations of our artillery pieces. And then I got promoted to captain, and I became the battery commander.
Wow. Can you go with us a little bit from step to step as to what your different duties were and how you mastered one to get ready for the next? Because a lot of people have no idea when you say captain, lieutenant,
well,
if it's not violating any confidentiality.
No, it's not. Back then, as I mentioned, when you got out of OCS, the Marine Corps, you were commissioned as second lieutenant, but it was a probationary commission. Probationary depending upon how well you did in the basic school, which was at that time 18 weeks of intensive classroom and field work. Once you completed that, your temporary commission went away and it became a permanent second lieutenant. Generally, you stayed a second lieutenant for 18 months, and at which time you were promoted to first lieutenant automatically. And then you would go, and whether you made captain or not depended upon lots of things. But what happened to a lot of us is we got accelerated in the promotion process because, unfortunately, we were put into positions in combat where we were filling roles above our rank. Mm-hmm. So instead of waiting 18 months for me to become a first lieutenant, I made it in about 14 months because I was performing the duties of a first lieutenant. And the same thing with captain. We lost so many junior officers in the Marine Corps over there, it was not uncommon to find first lieutenants, at least in the artillery, as being battery commanders, and that was normally a captain or a major's position. But as it relates to what we learned, a lot of it was just on-the-job training. I mean, at Fort Sill, at least, I mean, you learned how to operate artillery pieces. You understood the dynamics of elevations and powder charges, and you practiced quite a bit on the gunnery ranges out there, and you flew in helicopters and you adjusted artillery fire from helicopters. So the government spent a tremendous amount of energy and time training us in our professions. And this is not only true of the artillery, but also the other services, the combat engineers, especially the pilots. All the pilots had to do an extra year and a half of obligated service because of the intense training that they went through. Mm. But every Marine is a rifleman, and it was not uncommon to have pilots assigned to the infantry units as well. They perform what's called air observation. They would direct aircraft and to provide supporting fires for the infantry, just as I would direct the artillery.
Yeah.
Exactly the same thing. So we had teams. We had an FO and an AO, an air officer and a field artillery officer would work together.
Yeah, but the problem was those guys are out in front.
Oh, we were always in the front. For the 6 months we were on the
You're on the line all
We
the
were
time.
on the line all the time. Well, there was no line really. I mean, you're in the jungle all the time on, in some form of a patrol or a sweep. But there weren't any lines. The lines were whatever you drew up at night in a defensive position. Those were the only lines you had. Those were the only lines you had.
Now, is it safe to ask would you go out on a non-patrol, or you were fixed in a gun position, and that was where you operated from? How did you operate, by radio?
Well, right, I had a radio operator with me all the time. I tried to distance myself from him because we were always told that the NVA or the VC snipers would find a radio operator and they'd shoot them in front of him, assuming he was an officer. So I always tried. And I had a gunnery sergeant who took me aside when I came into the battery, and I always had my uniform starched and my lapels had my rank on it, and I always looked like AJ squared away. And he said to me, "If you go out into the field looking like that, you'll come back in a body bag."
Yeah.
So I remember one of my first patrols, he came up to me and put some dirt on my face and wrote a couple of four-letter words on my helmet liner. And told me to take my 45 off, which I was supposed to wear as an officer, and he gave me a shoulder holster. And I put my 45 in the shoulder holster and put my flak jacket over it so nobody could see it. And I carried a rifle just like any other rifleman. I tried to.
An M1 or a carbine?
No, it's an M14. M14.
Okay.
Back then, the Marine Corps didn't have the AR-16s or the M16s. The Army had them. We didn't. Back in '67, '68, all we had was the M14, which was basically a heavier M1.
Mm-hmm.
Wonderful weapon, very, very reliable. I carried that and tried to blend in with everybody else. The last thing I wanted to do was look like a young shaved-tailed lieutenant.
Stand out in the night.
No, I didn't. No, I listened to the senior staff NCOs took me aside and told me what the real world was like. And fortunately, I came back 13 months over there without a scratch. Without a scratch.
Had some good sergeants.
Pardon?
Had some good sergeants.
I had some good sergeants. Many of my friends get wounded, and we get together periodically, and they wear their Purple Hearts. And at one point, I felt bad because I didn't have a Purple Heart. And as I stand up today at age 70 and can walk around straight most of the time, I'm thankful I never got the Purple Heart.
Amen. They don't give them to you. The way you earn them doesn't count so much.
That's exactly right.
One of the things one of your fellow told me one time, going on patrol, when they were brought in, the helicopters really never landed. They just hovered, and the guys would jump out and then disperse.
That happened primarily.
That'd be a hot LZ?
Yeah, absolutely a hot LZ. They landed all the time in an admin role, but when they were bringing troops in, you're right, they'd be 3 or 4 feet off the ground. Guys would just jump out. Jump out in the raised paddies. The movies you see are accurate as it relates to that.
Okay.
The only time they really landed in hot zones was when you're putting bodies and wounded on, because you can't throw them up on top.
You got to load them in the hard way.
Right.
Are there any outstanding things that in your history, if you will, that you could share with us as to what you saw, more important, how you acted and reacted?
Well, as I mentioned, I didn't get it.
You don't have to be Audie Murphy.
No, but I'm not Audie Murphy. That's the whole point. I had a very unremarkable, that I can remember, tour of duty in combat. I was fortunate not to get wounded. I was fortunate not to suffer to the extent that many of my peers have through PTSD. But there were times when I was terrified. I can remember a couple of times where, especially in Tet 1968, I was up just outside of Way City when we were being rocketed. And that was a terrifying time because during the rocket attack, as the executive officer of my unit, I had to kind of rally the troops up, make sure they were manning the guns properly. And I remember running around with my flak jacket and helmet, and the rockets were landing around the compound, and that was kind of terrifying. But I didn't have a choice. I had to do it.
You had to do it.
I had to absolutely do it. And I think about that a lot, but I don't think about it with horror and terror. It's just a memory. I don't wake up at night like many people, with cold sweats and shaking, and I just didn't do that. I remember that. I remember another time where we were in a situation in a firefight, and I was with the air officer, and we called in napalm on a tree line, and the napalm was probably 100 yards away, and my eyelids were singed.
From the heat?
From the heat. That was a terrifying thing. I would have hate to have been on the receiving end of a couple of napalm bombs.
Oh, that's jellied kind of, isn't it?
That's if you think of sterno.
Okay.
If you think of sterno, it's sterno that's ignited when it hits the ground.
It just burns right through.
It burns. I mean, a couple of situations like that. But I remember one time we were in an operation. It was 34 days. We were out without going back to a combat base, and it was 114, 115 degrees most of the time on the jungle floors, and we had hunted killer dogs with us that we used to send into the tunnels, because the VC were in the tunnels and they were afraid of the dogs. And it was so hot down there, they medevaced the dogs and left because they dehydrated and they left the Marines. But I think the greatest part of my training came later, after I got active duty and got back into stayed on the active reserves, and I was responsible for a company of men and throughout the reserve training programs, at least as a junior officer, if you will, captain and major. But the leadership training you get out of the service, and particularly the Marine Corps, because I'm jealous. I mean, every service has Navy, Air Force, Coast Guard, Army. They've got outstanding training, but the Marines are a little bit proudful, to say the least.
No, you have to be. That's it.
And we're taught to believe that we're the toughest, the meanest, the smartest, but we're really not. I mean,
you had a job to do, and you were trained to do it.
You have a job to do, and you do it. If you don't listen and learn, people can get killed.
Yeah.
People can get killed. I had an acquaintance of mine who was a forward observer, and he didn't understand his craft very well, and he called in artillery fire on several occasions, almost on top of his unit. So you talked about accountability. They obviously relieved him of his duties.
Like quickly, hopefully.
But, they brought him back to Da Nang and gave him another job. And I met him one time when I was going through Da Nang. They made him the special services officer, and his job was to fly around to all the R&R ports in Southeast Asia, Penang, Singapore, Tokyo, to make sure that the Marines were being treated properly. I said, that's not demotion. I mean, people would have killed him.
That's rough duty.
That's rough duty.
Okay.
But my adult life, if you will, has been proscribed by my experiences in the military.
Good.
And very frankly, when I'm gone, I don't want to be thought of as somebody who worked in the banking industry or somebody who was in manufacturing. I want people to say, my dad, he was a Marine.
Hey, proud of you.
Absolutely.
Amen. When you left Nam, if you're through with Nam, did you have more than just one tour there, or
I only had one tour.
12 months?
What happened was, I only had 13 months. Marines had 13, the Army had 12 rather. I don't know why, but that's the way it worked. I got stationed in Quantico, Virginia for a while, and I ran into an acquaintance of mine from my hometown of Massachusetts who was on reserve duty down there, and he said, if you'd like to get stationed back in Massachusetts, I can get you stationed back there, but you're going to have to sign up for another year. So at the time I was married, I talked, well, maybe we can go to Rhode Island, where I came from. I said, fine. So I talked to this fellow who was doing the assignments, and he said, we have a job in Rhode Island for you if you want to swag for a year, sign on for another year. I said, what the heck, I'm only 22 years old. I have nothing else to do, so I'll go to Rhode Island. They had an artillery unit up there, and I was an artillery officer. This is perfect. And my job was to train the reserves. Well, being naive, I accepted the position. I went to Rhode Island, and they made me the casualty notification officer of the Marine Corps.
That's tough duty.
So from middle of 1968 to the end of 1969, I spent most of my time knocking on doors, making casualty calls, and conducting funerals. In the meantime, the Marine Corps decided to redesignate that artillery unit into a motor transport unit, and they took all my artillery pieces away from me. So at the end of 1969, I had a decision to make. Stay in or get out, and my wife was pregnant with our first child, and I talked about this, and she said, well, you can join the reserves and you can always go back on active duty later. I said, sure. So I got off active duty and I joined the active reserve unit in Rhode Island. And for the next 22 years, I progressed through a number of roles within the active reserve establishment throughout New England, actually in Washington, D.C., at the Pentagon as well. And I retired as a full colonel in 1992.
Now, did you, when you retired, you were still eligible for, and they take advantage of the GI Bill to get any additional education, that kind of stuff?
I got my master's degree in business administration at Bryant University. Thank you very much, United States government.
Amen.
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 I did that. And I could have retired after 20 years from the reserves. But I enjoyed the camaraderie so much, that I did 27. And I wasn't going to get promoted to general. That's a very, very narrow tip of that pen in the Marine Corps. I mean, there aren't that many generals in the Marine Corps, especially in the Marine Corps Reserve. So after 27 years, I was eligible for whatever retirement benefits I was ever going to get, even to 30, so I got off it. But I stay very close to the Marine Corps. I'm in the Marine Corps League, and I'm involved in a number of charitable organizations that involve Marines.
Well, you sure be one that you and some of your guys set up. I'd like you to give that a talk. Your help with the disabled.
Yeah, I will.
By name, if you will.
No, I will. I'll do that. I'm a director of a New Hampshire-based organization called Building Dreams for Marines. And it was formed by civilians back in 2011. Civilians who were part of a family program in Manchester that worked with the Marine unit here, Bravo Company, 2nd Battalion, and 25th Marine Regiment. They formed this charitable organization to raise money to rehab homes and condominiums for Marines who are suffering from any form of disability.
Physical and mental.
Physical and or mental. And I'll give you an example of some of the projects we've done in a moment.
Please.
We expanded that role to include Navy corpsmen who serve with the Marines. Because anybody who's ever been in a combat situation, be it a Marine or a soldier, knows that that corpsman or that medic is just as heroic, if not more so.
Amen.
Amen. They wear, in the case of the Marines, the corpsmen wear the Marine uniform. They go into battle with you. And you may be hiding behind a bunker, and they'll crawl out there and pull a wounded Marine back. And so, I mean, we had to expand it. And we're a 501c3. We're authorized only to operate in New Hampshire, at the present time anyway. We've done about 10 projects. The first one we did is for a Marine who had Alzheimer's. His wife wanted him to be able to get out and get some fresh air. We widened a door in the back of his house and built a big deck. There were several young men who have come back from Iraq with no legs or seriously injured. We've built wheelchair ramps for them. We put elevators into their houses. We rehabbed bathrooms to make them safe for them. And we raised money primarily through an annual golf tournament, motorcycle runs.
Rolling Thunder.
And since 2011, we've done about 9 projects. If we had paid contractors to do it, the projects would have costed close to $200,000. We've written checks for about half of that, and the difference being donated labor and materials from contractors, plumbers, electricians, etc.
Now, you have to have been a Marine to be in that
You have to have been, the criteria is the VA has got to designate you as being disabled.
No, but I mean, what would be the cadre of people who are doing the services? Civilians?
Absolutely, civilians,
okay.
Volunteers.
Okay.
Oh yeah, they have to be licensed electricians. All the contractors got to be licensed because of liability and workman comp issues. But we've had volunteers from the reserve unit come out to help dismantle and destroy and clean up. But when it comes to going in there, doing the plumbing, the electrical, et cetera, they're all licensed practitioners. They donate, many of them donate their time.
Oh, yeah.
They donate their time. When we speak to groups, they'll always say, well, what are you doing for the Army? We can't do anything for the Army or the Navy. However, I put together a list of 3 pages of organizations that actually perform any of the services we do. Habitat for Humanity being one of them, as an example. Homes for Heroes is another one. You get a little bit of help from the VA, but the VA can only do so much.
How about the wounded war veterans?
Wounded Warriors programs.
Are they in their own?
They do something different. There is no organization in New Hampshire right now that does exactly what we do. Habitat for Humanity will, on occasion, rehab homes, but their primary responsibility is to build homes or provide homes to individuals, deserving individuals who have equity in but I'm a member of, or affiliated with loosely affiliated with the New Hampshire Veterans Advisory Council. And we're forming a subcommittee up there that's going to bring all of these little groups together to see if we can share resources to help people in New Hampshire. So that takes up quite a bit of my time, and I enjoy it. It's, Marines helping Marines.
Yeah. Everybody helping everybody, that's the best part about it.
Right.
I'm wondering, of all the things that you've seen, said, and done, and I think you've answered all several times, but has this service been a positive or negative impact on your life and how you've lived?
The military?
Yeah.
Absolutely positive.
I know, it's a silly question.
No, but it really has. As I started to say before, I was a Dennis the Menace as a young kid. The nuns were always whacking me around, and I went to Catholic brothers. I mean, I was always getting in trouble, and I think if it wasn't for the Marine Corps, I'd still be
being bounced around by somebody.
But I think the military, this discipline, this structure, there's accountability, there's responsibility, there's teamwork, there's organization, there's all those things. I think have had a very positive impact on the way I've dealt with my civilian responsibilities and the way I lead my life today.
You talked a little bit earlier about your kids. You said you had 4. Just a little family bit. How are they reacting to Dad hadn't been in the service?
They absolutely are more proud than I am sometimes. I mean, if I could read to you all of the Veterans Day notes I got from my 4 kids and their friends, it would bring tears to your eyes. They're very proud. They're very, very proud of their father. Yeah. Now I have a boy and 3 girls. Nobody went in the military. I think I may have scared them away a little bit. One daughter said she didn't like the hairdos. She didn't want to go in. But I think they're very proud of their father, and they're proud of, as they grow older. The youngest is 34, the oldest is 44. I think they've learned to respect those that have served.
Okay, and they're learning to what it was all about.
They now understand what veterans have done for their country. Mm-hmm. And I've been able to provide them with a good life, and they're great parents, and I think
grandkids, gazelle.
Yeah, and that's the base. We have nothing to leave this world except our legacy and our children, and if we've done a decent job with them, then we've made a contribution.
Yeah, absolutely.
But I think the military had a massive impact on that.
Now, have you had the pleasure of having any kids locally, or did they spread around like ours have gone?
I've got 1 in Lowell, 1 in Worcester, 1 in Somerset, Massachusetts, and I have 1 in Brooklyn. And I see them often.
You're lucky.
I see them often. I play with the grandkids often. So, and because of the internet, particularly Skype, I Skype with the kids quite a bit.
See them back and forth?
I see them. Well, I actually have Skype on my cell phone. I can sit in a waiting room someplace and Skype with my daughter in Brooklyn. or my son down. And so that brings everything closer together. And
Great.
so I'm very fortunate in that regard. You know, Somerset's 100 miles away. You know, Lowell's 40 and Worcester's 75. So I mean, you can be down and back there very, very quickly. My wife and I spend quite a bit of time with the kids.
Highway, back and forth.
It's all highway driving. Not a problem.
Amen. Anything else you'd like to add to this interview, as far as what you've seen, what you've done, and what you're planning to do?
Well, number one, I'm thankful to have the opportunity to do this. I enjoy watching the local TV and watching your program. So I'm very appreciative of having an opportunity to participate in it. The only words of wisdom I would impart to young people today is don't be afraid of the military.
Amen.
You know, do not be afraid of the military. You know, it is not as popular today as it may have been before, but it's a great way to start out life. You know, if I could be the Emperor of the United States, I'd insist that every young person do 2 years of government service. They could pick what they wanted. Mm-hmm. Military, you know, the Peace Corps, AmeriCorps. I think until you've traveled overseas or participated, you don't realize what it means to be born in America today. You know, go to Southeast Asia someday, or go to China, as I've been. Go to Vietnam. Go to South Korea. Actually, South Korea is probably more modern than we are today. But to see how people live and how you don't really get a chance to understand how fortunate it is to be born in America today. Young people today take a lot for granted. I think, you know, being involved in the military makes you appreciate a little bit more of what it means to be born in the United States.
Amen. Just this as an example: a cup of clean, drinkable water.
That's exactly right. When I was in Vietnam, I used to take a canteen cup, go down to a rice paddy, take my hand and move scum off the top, take it out, pick out the bugs out, put in 2 iodine tablets, shake it up and drink it and think I was back home. Yeah. So, I mean, I never got any bugs that I know of. But you're absolutely right, the clean water, it's precious.
It's a simple thing.
It is.
It's so valuable.
Yep.
You said earlier that I'm not killing time. I'm just curious because this guy's had such a varied history. One of your current hobbies or avocations, you are a cruise or a trip counselor or planner.
Yeah.
Give us a bit of that, if you will, because it's something I've been looking into, frankly.
Well, in 2006, I went to a reunion of former officers, OCS classmates of mine, and one of them had just come back from Vietnam. He went over there as a tourist with a company called Military Historical Tours, which was at the time was headquartered in Virginia, Alexandria, Virginia, and they were formed about 25 years ago by military officers, and they travel all over the world conducting tours. They're the only touring company that the Japanese allow to lead tours to Iwo Jima. They go to Iwo Jima once a year. They take 2 plane loads over there. But they also go all over the world. So I got talked into going back to Vietnam. So 5 or 6 of us went back. And as I mentioned earlier, I had gone to Vietnamese language school and still remembered a few words. And I got over there and I enjoyed it. I found it clean. I found the food outstanding, the hotels very good. Road network was still poor. The people were wonderful. I had a chance to speak with a lot of the Vietnamese people and find out that they bear no grudges against the Americans, none whatsoever. I think a lot of it has to do with the Buddhist philosophy that doesn't go back and look at the past except as it relates to relatives. They call it the American War, not the Vietnamese War. And I found a lot of people spoke English. And I enjoyed myself. So when I went back, the company contacted me later on and said, well, you speak some Vietnamese. We'd like you to go back over there again, but as an assistant tour leader. So I said, fine. Mm-hmm. So I did. And I've done that off and on since 2006. I've been to Vietnam 11 times. I've led tours to South Korea and China 3 times. France, Normandy a couple of times. I had a chance to take my wife with me. I don't get paid for it. I get my expenses reimbursed. But the real benefit is to do some travel and go to places I might not otherwise go.
And meet some good people.
And meet some fantastic people and share experiences with them. I bet I participated with maybe 200-300 people over that since 2006. Enjoyed very, very much. In fact, I'm going back. I'm doing 3 tours in 2015. I'm taking a group of young cadets from the Citadel back to Vietnam. Probably a dozen or so of them. And then when I come back, at the end of April, I'm leading a tour to Ireland. We're going to do a sweep from Dublin all the way down through the southwest, up north to Donegal, and back over to Northern Ireland and back. And the military side of that is that between 1941 and 1944, we had close to 300,000 servicemen trained and passed through Northern Ireland en route to Africa and into Europe. We had 6 Army divisions trained there. Derby's Rangers were formed there. We had 2,000 sailors repairing ships in Derry and Belfast, and we had a 600 Marine battalion providing security. If you travel through the 6 provinces or 7 counties, if you will, of Northern Ireland today, there are monuments all over to the United States servicemen who served there. That's another thing that keeps me busy. Between my building dreams for Marines and my military historical tours, it consumes quite a bit of time, keeps me fired up and energized.
Do you have a bag packed all the time?
I can go to, the answer is yes. I take just a small rolling bag away for 2 weeks, Other members of my family travel like the Standing Army of Russia with bags and things, but...
And Grammy on the truck.
That's exactly right. But now I have a bag packed, I'm ready to go. Give me a phone call and give me a plane ticket, I'm out of here.
Being pushy, do you need a helper? A striker?
Plenty of
the number 1 houseboy.
Like a lot of people do that.
I imagine there's a long line of doing that. What I'd like to do, I think it's 3 words.
What?
Thank you, friend, for your service and your help.
Thank you.
It's been pleasant.
Good.
That's a wrap, folks. Tech way of saying it, but before I shut off, again, I'd like to remind each and every one of you, 211. If you or some guy or gal who has been in the service feels that they need some help, please come and do it. Now, before we leave, though, there's a couple of pictures I'd like to show you or have Dave talk about, and then we'll crank him in. This is one right here.
Yeah. This is a picture of a 155 millimeter howitzer that was one of the 4 that was in my artillery battalion, my artillery unit, I should say, my battery. This was taken at a place called Anwar, in the Anwar Combat Base back in 1968. In my battery, I had 4 of these, and I had 6 105 millimeter howitzers, and these were used again in support of Marine activity during that period of time.
Okay, here's a couple more.
Yeah, this is a picture of a reinforced bunker, if you will, and this was my artillery's operations center back in 1968 during the Tet Offensive, a place called Phu-Bai. And I've been back there a couple of times, and I can't find anything that even looks like the Marines were there. It's been all scavenged. Yep. And
that's the last one.
Yeah, this last picture, it's going to be kind of difficult to see. It's a damaged vehicle. This was one of the vehicles in my battery that took a direct hit with a 120 millimeter rocket during the Tet Offensive at Phu-Bai. I happened to have been running around in the compound during this whole process when this got hit, and damage is terrible. I've probably got 300 pictures, but they're all on 35 millimeter slides. I've never converted them, but someday I might get around to that.
Well, I'd like to see them. If I may be, I'll even buy the beer.
Okay.
Again, the CB's helping the Marines.
Good.
Okay, folks. Again, We ask that if you can and will, after seeing this show, if you do and can, please come and share those experiences with us. The address will be in the back here, and we'll do all we can to make sure that you're happy, but more important, we will be filling in another piece of history. The bottom line is, if you don't tell your story, nobody else will, and we have that void. Again, Bob Stevens saying thank you, stay healthy.